Welcome to the Season of Self-Love podcast. I am your host, NmW&x, and I am thrilled to have you join me on this transformative journey. You see, every day we dive into a powerful conversation about self-discovery, healing, and empowerment. This podcast is brought to you by Ask Naomi and Elevate Me Self-Discovery, where we believe that loving yourself is the first step to living a fulfilling life. You can expect insightful discussions, practical tips, and inspiring stories. Plus, we'll occasionally welcome special guests who will share their unique perspectives on self-love and personal growth. So get comfy, grab your favorite beverage, and let's embark on this journey together. Because it's time to embrace the beautiful person that you are. So let's elevate our lives one episode at a time. Now let's get started. My beautiful souls, well, welcome back to the Season of Self-Love podcast. I'm your host, NmW&x, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. As we continue our Act of Balancing Life series this month, we've been exploring how to create balance in different areas of our lives. And today's episode is especially exciting because we are focusing on finding balance and clarity in personal decision making. You know, life often throws us choices, big and small, that can feel very overwhelming, whether it's making a decision about your career, a relationship, or even your own personal growth. But finding that balance between your emotions and rational thinking is the key to making empowered decisions. Well, today I am joined by the incredible Mike Fink, a renowned author, personal development coach, and personalizing decision-making and balancing life challenges. Now, you know, Mike has been with us before. He has been with us before, and I opened up for him to come back. But before we bring him back, I want to remind you that we have the free mini ebook that's available right now on our website, the 5 simple ways to set your intentions on a harmonious life, as well as our 21-day challenge, life balance, and our ebook. We have another ebook, 102 pages of everything that you can possibly have for tools to help you to balance your life. But before we bring Mike back to the stage, let's take a quick break. All right? It's your girl, Goddess NmW&x here on the Season of Self-Love podcast, and we'll be right back. What are some common barriers that prevent people from expressing? Hey, it's your girl, Goddess NmW&x here from the Season of Self-Love podcast.
Yeah, I would say remorse. So shame and guilt is a very dividing emotional.
And these are one of the many amazing conversations that we have every day, Monday through Friday, right here on the Season of Self-Love podcast with myself, NmW&x, as well as our resident therapist, Dr. Will Washington of Washington Wellness Institute. Come by.
The reality of our relationships with people.
Come by.
And a lot of times we're afraid of how people look at us. And so that compassion can't enter.
You can hit us on the website, really the Season of Self-Love podcast.com. Let me ask you this. With the truth, is it...
Hey, this is Dog Pound Mike from Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap podcast. Come check us out every week. And remember, I'm no relationship expert. I just tell it like I hear it from the kennel. Get back at it.
Hey, my beautiful people. This is your girl, your host, NmW&x here of the Season of Self-Love. And I just want to take a quick moment to share some exciting resources from our series, The Act of Balancing Life. Are you ready to bring more harmony into your life? Well, we have a free mini ebook just for you. 5 simple ways to set your intentions for a harmonious life. It's perfect for helping you to align your goals with your values. And if you're ready to go a deeper dive, check out our 102-page ebook/workbook, Balancing Act, a guide to harmonizing your life, loaded with strategies and exercises. Plus, don't miss our 21-day challenge of living life in balance. Head over to our website right now and grab you a free mini ebook and start your journey towards a balanced life today. All right, well, welcome back to the Season of Self-Love podcast. I am your host, NmW&x, and I am here with Mr. Mike Fink. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Naomi.
Well, welcome back.
I'm super excited to be back.
Yes. So this time, I think we missed this the last time. This time, let's do this. And I do this on every show. Is I want to do a nice little quick 60-second guided meditation before we get in hand, because I know you a talker. And you like, yes. And I love it. And I want to make sure I got my pen and my paper ready, my purpose pen and my purpose paper ready for everything that you have to give today. All right. So my listeners right now, you know how we do it. Before we get into the topic at hand, let's just take a moment just for a nice guided meditation. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Wherever you are, if it's safe to do so, I invite you to close your eyes or just simply soften your gaze. Take a deep breath in and now slowly exhale. All right, let's do this again. Take a deep breath in, filling your lungs with air. Now exhale, letting go of any tension or stress. Now, as you continue to breathe, I want you to imagine your life as a balance scale. On one side, you have your emotions, your heart. And on the other side, you have your rational thoughts, your mind. Both are important and both play a role in the decisions that you make. Now, in this moment, I want you to visualize your heart and your mind coming into balance. With each breath, I want you to feel yourself becoming more centered and more grounded, more in tune with both your emotions and your logic. Now, I want you to inhale balance and exhale tension. One more deep breath in. Exhale out. And when you are ready, gently open your eyes and bring your awareness back to the space. Thank you. Beautiful people, thank you again for just joining me this time. And if you're new here to the Season of Self-Love podcast, this is something that we do every day, Monday through Friday, is we help guide ourselves ground ourselves before we get into the topic at hand. And again, we have Mike Fink. Mike Fink is not only a brilliant artist, a coach and a personal development expert who helps people to navigate life challenges by making clear and balanced decisions. And again, we've had him here before. Yes. And we kind of got caught up in the topic and we couldn't get it all away because it was so much to learn. Again, welcome back, Mike.
Thank you so much, Naomi. So we have plenty of things to discuss for part number 2.
Yeah, part number 2. All right. So let's talk about why balance is so important in decision making. You know, often we think of balance and we think of work balance or manage our time, but there's so much more to it. And could you tell us why is balance so crucial when it comes to making personal decisions?
You know, that's a great question. And I think it also depends on how you define balance, right? So I'm going to give you two angles on that one. The first one is that balance means or can mean that you make a decision that you feel good about on all levels, right? Because sometimes we know that we need to make a decision, but we know it logically. And we have all this emotional resistance, right? And maybe all our friends around us tell us, but Naomi or Mike, why don't you do it? It's so obvious to other people. We may even agree with them logically, but we have this emotional resistance or this intuition or knowing voice that says, you know what, I'm not sure. And when you find yourself out of balance between your head, your heart, and your gut, well, this is when you're stuck in indecision, in the status quo. And if somehow you manage or you're being pushed to make a decision, you will always be in second guessing and fear of regret because you're out of balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes, yes. Yes, it does, you know, because the thing is that many of us struggle with that tug of war between, and you know, the thing is I am a Libra And so I am the scale. And one of the things that they say about our Libra signs that we are very indecisive. I don't agree with that totally, but I understand. I totally see and understand exactly what that means. And I love the way that you say about the logical. We are more emotional than we are logical. So how do we begin to balance these two sides when making those decisions?
That's another great question. So let me do a quick recap for your listeners in case they're listening to this episode without having listened to the first episode. So basically, the thing is that we make so many life decisions. I think there was a study that showed that on food alone, we are making 227 decisions per day. But most of those decisions are like, should I put salt on my eggs or not, right? But we're used to making decisions. What am I going to wear today? Which route am I going to take to get to work or whatever that is? And we think that we are good at decision making. And for the most part, we are, because those are small decisions.
Right.
The reality, though, is that there are a few decisions in life that have to do maybe with relationships. I know you talk, and this is like part of the season of self-love, about betrayal. If you have been betrayed, then what do you do about your relationship? Do you keep on staying? Do you try to heal it? Do you try to fix it? Or do you move on? But there are also other decisions that have to do maybe with your work, with your career. Maybe you are unhappy in your current job and you hate it, but you're so afraid that if you quit it, maybe you will lose your benefits, or what the future holds, or what if you cannot make it, and so on. Or maybe you are afraid of moving to a different city or state, or starting a new relationship. And those decisions are really decisions that have a overwhelming or disproportionate effect on our lives, because once we make them, they affect us for the long term and on many, many fronts, and they can also affect other people around us and so on. And quite often those decisions are quite complex, meaning there's a lot of things to consider, and there are also very high cost of failure. So last time, and I'm going to describe for all your listeners, I have here like a brain mock-up, and basically we don't have just one brain, we have three brains. And people who are listening can think about the brain as an ice cream cone that has three scoops on top of it. And the first scoop is the primal brain, the old brain, the emotional brain, the primal brain. Have you heard those terms before?
Yes.
The old brain, the brain, right? Yes. So I'm going to get back to this one, because this part of the brain is in charge of our survival. Then we have the emotional brain. Well, it's in charge of our emotions. And then finally, we have the rational brain on top of it, which is the part that is in charge of logic, of reasoning, of language. And quite often we are caught in those situations where we don't know what to do. So we have two problems. The first one is we don't have clarity, because even logically we're not sure what to do. But then there's a second problem, which is even if we were to get clarity, then how do we find that balance that we're talking about at the beginning between our head, our heart, and our gut?
Right.
Because, I specialize in helping women considering divorce make the right decision in 30 days or less. And I cannot count the number of women who tell me, my therapist thinks I should divorce, but my marriage counselor thinks I should divorce, but. And the but comes from the fact that they may agree logically, but there's no balance between the head, the heart, and the gut. So in the last episode, I shared, some things that you can do. And the first thing that you can do to get clarity, because clarity is the thing that will lead you to certainty, is to, first of all, find out all the pieces of the puzzle, right? Because you cannot solve the puzzle if you don't have all the pieces.
Right, exactly.
Step number 2 was really about, once you understand what is important to you, and by all the pieces of the puzzle in terms of the personal relationship, I meant what is important to you in your ideal relationship? What is important to you in your ideal mate, in your ideal spouse? And most people have a number of things, such as, maybe they want somebody who is good looking, or affectionate, or a good communicator, or a good listener, or who likes to travel, or who likes hard rock music, or who likes classical music. I mean, it is so subjective. Every single person has a set of things that is important to them. And for most people, as far as a relationship is concerned, it's 20 to 30 things, which may sound like a lot. But if that's the case, that means that you are not considering all the necessary pieces, because really, when you sit down and take the time to write down and think, that's the number that is true for most people. So you need to gather all the pieces of the puzzle. The second step, though, was, once you have this beginning of clarity, because you know what's important to you, is like, okay, now that I know what's important to you, and by the way, this could be true for a job. What is important to me in my job? Is it commute time? Is it distance? Is it salary? Is it growth opportunities? Is it teamwork? Is it time flexibility? This is true also for hiring an employee. What do I want in the employee? Do they need to have initiative, or do they need to follow procedures, or and so on? It's true for buying a house. So this finding balance for decisions applies across so many life areas. But it is important to understand what is relevant and valuable to you, but also in which order, because otherwise most people are caught into the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Talked about betrayal, and I had this client, her name was Felicia. Her husband had betrayed her several times, even though he had been into some sex addiction support groups supposedly, but even after that he had betrayed her, and she was devastated. But he was such an amazing dad. And she kept going between on one side he cheated on me, but he's an amazing dad. Bing bong, bing bong. It was this endless loop between the pros and cons. So that's why you need to have all the pieces of the puzzle. But then the next step was to really understand what is more important versus less important, because otherwise you don't know, where to go first. Once you have this ranking of what's more important versus less important, and it's not that easy to do, but it is necessary, especially when you have so many variables, 20 to 30. The next thing is to understand what is essential versus optional, because otherwise you don't know what you can and cannot compromise on. First of all, does that make sense so far, Naomi?
Yes, it does. It does.
So this distinction between essential and optional may sound obvious when you hear it, and yet so many people ignore it. And that's one of the reasons why doing marriage counseling quite often is putting the cart before the horse, because if you don't know what you can compromise on, then you don't know what to work on specifically. And maybe you will work on some things that your spouse is willing to make efforts on. And then you find yourself in a worse situation than before, because now they have taken the time, they have put in effort, they have made changes. But if they didn't make those changes on the real needle movers, you're still unhappy. But now you have the added guilt of, wow, he made those changes, he made efforts. And if I still feel like letting go, it's worse. Right. So you really need to understand what's essential versus optional. And, this is where we left it last time. I'm going to give you also another quick story about this client that I had, Stacy. Her husband was super messy. He always left the dishes in the sink and the laundry on the floor. And she kept nagging him because she was unhappy in the relationship. And the most obvious cues in terms of why she was unhappy was around her and her environment. He's messy, he leaves things around. And she kept nagging him. But when she finally understood not only all the things that were important to her, but what was more important versus less important, what was essential versus optional, it turned out that having a tidy husband was value number 21 out of 22. It was not only optional, but it was the second to last.
Right.
And that was a huge aha moment for her, because she realized, okay, I've been spending so much time, effort, and aggravation on something that didn't matter that much. I can take care of the house. And then she was able to identify the real points of leverage to make her relationship work. And in her specific case, she was able to save the relationship. So this is a quick summary of what we talked last time in terms of how to really get clarity and also certainty, because once you know, okay, all the things that are important to you, in what order of importance, what's essential versus optional, then you can determine, well, does my spouse, or does this job offer, or does this house, or whatever option you're considering, how does it work regarding the essential ones? And you can start looking, wow, are most of my essentials fulfilled? If so, what about the top 5? Are they fulfilled or not? And I remember this client, she had been in a relationship. Overall, her husband fulfilled 70% of the things that were important to her, but it's not how many things are being fulfilled, it's which ones. And when she went through that process, she realized that, yes, he fulfills almost, not almost all, but 70%, but really it's a lot of the optional ones, and 4 out of the top 5 are missing. So when she realized that, it was like, oh my gosh, it's never going to work, and now I know why. So that's when you have logical clarity. But let me go back to the brain, because this is about the balance that we talked about at the beginning of the call. Once you get the logical clarity with your rational brain in terms of, now I know all those things, what's essential, what's optional, and so on, it's not enough, because you need to communicate this certainty to the other parts of your brain. Because let's go back to the reptilian part of your brain, the old brain, that's the one in charge of your survival. And whenever you have a decision to make where getting it wrong could be so costly, your brain says, hey, hold your horses. When in doubt, wait it out. Because as long as you don't make a decision, you cannot be blamed for anything.
Right.
But if you make a decision, first of all, in general, in life, when you are making significant changes, it gets worse before it gets better, right? I mean,
Yeah.
think about renovating a bathroom. First, you have to do what? Tear it down, create dust, it gets messy before you can rebuild it and create something better. So you know that it's going to get worse before it gets better, possibly. So if you don't have the certainty it's going to get better, your old brain says, hey, hold your horses. No. Even though right now it sucks, but the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't.
Right.
So you need to address this part of your brain because it's the gatekeeper of the decision. Now, that part of your brain was formed 500 million years ago. The emotional part of your brain, the one on top of it, the second scoop of ice cream, was formed 200 million years ago. And the rational brain, the one in charge of logic, of reasoning, of language, was formed 2 to 3 million years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm mentioning this not just because I'm giving you a piece of trivia so you can win a Trivial Pursuit, but because what it means is that your primal brain, your emotional brain were formed before we developed language as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now listen to this. It's huge because it means that your primal brain and emotional brain, Naomi, do not understand words. Let me repeat that. They do not understand language. They do not understand words. And how do most people try to get to a decision? Whether it's with therapy, whether it's with marriage counseling, whether it's talking with their friends. What is it? They talk, right?
Yeah.
They use words. So that's why they don't find the balance between the logic and the heart and the gut. So the next step is, if that is true, then how can we communicate with the parts of our brain who are in charge of our decision so we can get them on board and find the balance that we want between our head, our heart, and our gut?
Right.
Rather than me giving you the answer, I'm going to help you find the answer, Naomi, as well as your listener. So let me guide you through a thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I know you have a daughter. She's 12 years old. And I would assume that if you were to find out that your daughter was being physically abused at school, physically bullied by another child at school, you would be upset, correct?
Oh, very, yes.
Okay. Now, let's take this, and I'm going to present you that same exact piece of information, but I'm going to use 4 different ways to give you that information. So, way number 1, a person comes to you and says, you know what? They just tell you, Naomi, your 12-year-old daughter is being bullied at school. You would be upset, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Now, let's try a different way. A person comes and tells you that your 12-year-old daughter is being bullied at school, but this time, you know what the other child who is physically abusing your daughter looks like.
I know what the other child looks like.
Say that again?
You say, I know what the other child looks like?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
When you know what the other child looks like, are you less upset, equally upset, or more upset?
Oh, I'm still upset. Is it any more or less? I'm just upset.
Okay, you're upset. But for you, it's just not just as upset. Interesting. Let me give a third scenario. A person comes, they don't tell you anything, but they show you pictures that they have taken of your daughter being physically bullied by this other child. Now, in terms of upset, are you just as upset, equally upset, or more upset when you see those pictures?
I'm pissed.
Okay, so pissed to me, that's a different level. And let's try a 4th way. Naomi. You drive to school, like you're probably going to do this afternoon. You get out the car, and you see it with your own eyes, your daughter being physically bullied by another child. How upset are you? Less, equally, or even more?
Even more, but this is the thing. I'm trying to figure out, why did I wait 4 times to hear it before I didn't go in there and do something? No, I'm telling you, that is where I'm at. Like the first time, it wouldn't have been the 4 times.
I get it, and that's quite a natural reaction. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love your sense of humor. So, okay. Now, here is the question, though, because I gave you the exact same piece of information It was the same thing. Your daughter is being bullied at school.
Yeah.
But there was somehow, you're upset, and you're pissed, and then you're like really upset. There was an increase in the level of emotion that you were perceiving. It was the same exact piece of information. The difference between just a person telling you and knowing what the other child looked like, seeing pictures and witnessing with your own eyes, was your ability to visualize the scene, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that your primal brain, your old brain, and your emotional brains, they don't understand words. What they do understand is images.
Mm-hmm.
You feel it when you see it. And last time I was teasing, I was saying, I'm going to answer today the question, why when you see a movie, when you watch a movie where you already know logically that it has a happy ending, but yet during the movie, when you see all the struggles and the fights, you're still feeling anxious, right? And yet logically you know it. And that's the answer. So I have those two metaphors. For women, I talk about the notebook. You know that Noah and Ali will get together and live happily ever after. But until that point, you see the struggles and you have all those negative emotions. Why? Because even though you'll know it logically with the rational part of your brain, your emotional brain, your primal brain don't feel it until they see it. The other example for guys is if you watch Rocky, the movie, and you know that he's going to win in the end, but when he's being pummeled at the beginning of the movie by Ivan Drago and he's bleeding, you feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
You feel it when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the way to communicate. Once you have certainty, you need to use a visual language to communicate that to the other parts of your brain to have balance. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it does. It does. It makes sense. Sense.
Okay. Now, it sounds obvious when I say it, and yet nobody talks about it. When we go to therapy, it's all talk therapy. When we go to marriage counseling, we keep on talking because, yes, we have that ability to be rational, but we also have those more primitive parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another thing that I want to point out in terms of the power of visual, which is I mentioned a bit earlier that whenever you're considering all the pieces of the puzzle, you need to consider between 20 to 30 variables. And there's another advantage of using the visual language to make an assessment of your entire relationship or of your options, whether it's quitting your job or finding a new job or buying a house or whatever that is. And I'm going to lead you again through another thought experiment. So let's imagine that I take you to a cocktail party.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of people, and before getting inside a room, you know that there are other people at the center of the room having an animated conversation. They talk to one another.
Yes.
But before getting to that room, I blindfold you, and I say, Naomi, I'm going to take you blindfolded. You can only hear what's going on, and I'm going to take you to the center of the room, and you're going to have to tell me to, quote unquote, try to guess or tell me to the best of your ability how many people exactly are in the center of the room having a conversation.
Mm.
So if you are blindfolded, being only able to listen all the people, talking back and forth and maybe moving inside the center of the room, how long do you think it would take you to come up with an answer in terms of how many people exactly are speaking in the center of the room? Knowing that it's at least 5, between 5 and 10.
Between 5 and 10. Walking in, first of all, I have to remove certain walls that I have up. Let's get that straight. With the blindfold walking in, but now I have to listen. Now I truly have to focus on listening,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a thing of feeling of that I can feel, people as well. So
Mm-hmm.
as I'm standing in the middle of the room and just witnessing through my ears.
Yes.
So this is where I have to tap in more into that than my visual. So now I'm strengthening this sense rather than this sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how long do you think, by using just your ears, how long do you think it would take you to come to a good estimate of how many people are talking in the room?
About oh my God, about 10 or 15 minutes.
It would take minutes, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's 10 or 15, but for sure minutes. We agree on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how certain would you be of your answer? Would you be 100% certain, or would there be some room for error?
It will be some room for error.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's try a different scenario. Now I take you, we go back, you're outside of the room. You know that it's a cocktail party. You know that there are a number of people talking inside in the center of the room between 5 and 10. This time I put earplugs in your ears so you cannot hear anything but you have your eyes open. I take you inside the room. How long does it take you to know exactly how many people are in the center of the room?
As soon as I walk through the door.
Right, it's seconds, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but
Yeah.
how
Mhm.
certain are you of your answer?
I'm very certain. Unless they
Absolutely.
hiding under the table.
You're very certain and you do this in seconds. So this is another advantage of using visual communication. So
Mhm.
the reason this is relevant is because in the process for decision making that I have developed that I call the decoding grid, you take all the logical information that we have talked about earlier in terms of all the pieces of the puzzle, the 20 to 30 things that are important to you. You rank them, you distinguish between what's essential, what's optional, but then you use that as a visual map to assess your spouse or to assess your job or to assess a house. And you start, you may have the 20 to 30 things listed, and you have a color contrast between the essential versus the optional. So you have like a darker yellow background for the essentials. And you know that this is the area where you should focus your effort because the optional, by definition, it's optional, right?
Right.
And then you start assessing each value at a time. For example, if one of the things is I want somebody who's physically affectionate, is my spouse physically affectionate? If it's a yes, you put a green mark. If it's a kind of, it's a blue mark. If it's a no, it's a red mark. And you go like that value by value. And suddenly you have this visual map where you can immediately understand and assess a lot of variables at once, right? Because you can,
Right.
that's the power of visual, you can consider many variables at once. And immediately you get a sense of your relationship. Is it more in the red zone? Or is it more in the blue zone or the green zone, right? You have
Right.
this sense where you not only understand it logically, but also emotionally on a gut level, like, wow, now I can see why, even though my partner has a lot of things going on for them, it's not working because most of the green is in the optional, but there's a lot of red in the essential. And
Mhm.
you can see this as a glance and you feel it and it makes sense. You have this balance between your head, your heart, and your gut. So this is really relevant because I remember working with this client. Her name, well, it's obvious I'm protecting her privacy, so I'm going to say that her name was Kim. But she had been married for 25 years, and she had been struggling with the decision whether to divorce or not for many, many years, but more intensely for the previous 3 years because she had had an affair. She had met another man. Now, I didn't judge her. My
Right.
philosophy is that we always make the best possible choices when we make them. Otherwise, we make different choices. So she made the
Exactly.
best possible choice. And she was in this situation where she had met this other man who had left his wife, who was waiting for Kim to divorce her husband. But she didn't want necessarily to divorce her husband. She wasn't sure. Maybe she could save the relationship. Her son was grown up. He knew about the affair, but he was asking Kim to make a decision because he couldn't take lying to his dad anymore. So she was in this
Ooh.
impossible situation for 3 years, and she just knew that whatever decision she would make, she would hurt people, either her husband or this other man, and she was completely lost. So I helped her understand or gather all the pieces of the puzzle, determine what was more important versus less important, distinguish what was essential versus optional. And then we created this visual map. And when she had a look at it, it turned out that there were 26 things that were important to her in her ideal partner and 14 that were essential. But when she assessed her husband, out of 14 things, well, 10 were not being fulfilled.
Mhm.
So 10 out of 14 essential values were not being fulfilled. And when she saw that, she really understood why she had been so unhappy with her husband and why she would never be able to fix the relationship because asking her husband to change significantly on 10 fronts, he would
Right.
need what I call a personality transplant, right? And there was such a huge relief for her because she was able to assess and make a decision about her marriage based only on the merits of her marriage, not on the fact that she had met another person.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes tight. Yeah.
So when she saw that, it was like really an eye opener. And then the next logical question was, okay, now we know that your husband is not a good match. And it wasn't that he was a bad person, he was simply not a good fit. The next logical question is, well, what about this other guy? Is he a good fit or not? And when we assessed it visually, it turned that all the essentials and all the options, I think there was only one which was in the optional, were they were all green except for one. He was a near perfect match. And then we put those two side by side. And when she saw it, it was like a slap in the face. It was so obvious to her when she saw it visually, like a lot of red in here and all green in here. It's like, yeah, it's obvious. Now I know I feel so much better in this other relationship and why my relationship with my husband will never work. But she couldn't come to that conclusion beforehand because there was no balance between her head, her heart, and her gut.
Yeah.
But by aligning the logic, meaning using logical tools
Yeah.
to give her certainty and clarity, and then presenting that information in a visual way that all parts of her brain could understand, then she had that balance. And, she had always been afraid of confrontation, but she took 1 week to kind of digest all the answers. And 1 week later, she talked to her husband. She was calm. She was composed. She explained gently to him that she had realized their relationship would never work. He was very distraught. He would try to sway her, but because she knew that the relationship could never work, she was able to avoid them trying to save the relationship and spending more time, more effort, more energy on something that would maybe have given him false hopes only to be crushed later.
Right.
And
Yeah.
she just left him and went to live with the other man the day after. So that's the power of having balance in your personal decisions. So I know I've talked a lot, Naomi. I've shared a lot, but does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. It makes total sense. I guess as you were talking, I was saying, because you said it was a lot of green that the other man had, and then it was just, maybe a few or one red. And was that red optional, or was that red essential?
There was so much red, even most of the optionals were red, but the most important part was like 10 out of 14 essentials were red. There were only 4 things that were important to her that were being fulfilled. Now, it was top 1 and top 2, which is
For the new man, not the husband.
For the
new
man, he was green all over and I think it was like 1 optional that was not fulfilled. And it actually wasn't not fulfilled. She said, I need more information because she hadn't lived with him fully, right? So he was a green on all fronts, and there was an orange, which orange means like I need to find out more information before I can make a definite assessment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And you think, well, isn't that obvious when it's a perfect match? And yet it isn't. Because when we don't know how to make sense of our emotions, of our thinking, when we cannot explain what we feel, it's all jumbled like the Rubik's Cube. Yes, we have all the pieces within ourselves, but when they're jumbled, they're completely out of sequence.
Right.
You need to put them in the proper sequence to make sense of them. And also another question that may come up is, well, was it wishful thinking on her part that this other man was all green? And the answer is no, because the way you gather all the pieces of the puzzle is completely detached from any relationship. You just think about your ideal spouse, partner, in a way that's detached. You define precisely how to know when a value is being fulfilled or not, so that then you can come back and get to the truth of the matter in a detached way. So it was truly a great match for her, and she wasn't able to understand that until she saw that she understood it and she saw it with her eyes, so that there was this balance between head, heart, and gut, logic, emotions, and intuition.
Okay. All right. I want to do this really, really fast.
Yes.
I want to pause, and then I'm going to come right back. Just pause for a moment on this one really quick. All right, Mike. So I love everything that you were just saying. And I know you talked a lot about essential and rational. You talked a lot about that. And you even, talked about the emotional part. But one thing is that I know a lot of us, and I know a lot of my listeners, is that we tend to make decisions based off emotional, as you just, with your last client that you just spoke about, that you truly had to break it down for her with the essentials and the optional. So explain to my audience how that essential and optional, how does that compare to emotional and rational?
So it's a good question. And, in a way, yes, we tend to make decisions so I'm going to answer your first point, based on emotions. At the same time, though, there are some specific situations where we may feel some emotions, but because we cannot explain them logically, we tend to shove them under the rug. And then, we make a decision because we think it's the logical thing to do. And I'm saying this because there are a number of women that told me, I knew before my wedding that there was something off. but I couldn't explain it. And that
Right.
means that they didn't pay attention to their emotions. Their emotions were all over the place, but they just went logically thinking, oh, it's going to just be fine later. Why? Because they couldn't explain it. And since calling off a wedding is such a big decision with such a high cost, unless you have certainty, you don't make that lightly. So yes, in general, if it's maybe buying a pair of shoes or some other item that we like, the emotions can come and drive our decision. But for those kinds of big decisions that are very costly if we get it wrong, quite often it's you need to have really this balance between the logical and the emotional. So now your question about the essential versus the optional and the rational versus the emotional. In a way, they are two separate things, meaning that understanding what is essential versus optional gives you a logical understanding of how to make a good decision. If you see that this person fulfills all my optionals, but I really don't care much about those, and none of my essentials, well, logically, now you can make sense of why you have had these conflicted emotions and why you'd be better off moving forward with leaving, because it's never going to work.
Right.
But at the same time, it also helps you understand and make sense of your emotions. Yes, if that person had been a monster, it had been like red everywhere, even though I will say I work with some women where it's a red everywhere, but because they cannot explain it logically, they're still stuck because they're still afraid of making a bad decision. But usually being able to articulate, now I get it. There were some moments that were good because those things were fulfilled, but at the end of the day, they're not the most important ones. So knowing that the essential ones are missing, it enables me to make a decision that I understand logically and that now also makes sense to me emotionally when I see it, when I see that the essential area is red versus the optional area.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little.
Okay.
Because I guess I want to go, I guess I'm missing where the emotional is at. The emotional aspect of it. Does that make sense?
So tell me more, and then I'll give you an answer.
When you say essential and when you say what is essential and optional.
Yep.
Right. And so I wanted a comparison to essential and optional versus emotional and rational. And as you said about a lot of times is that you try to make sense to make it rational, for it. So compare that with optional, compare that with essential. So when we have essential things that we need that will make our relationship work to go, would that be rational? And
So
would the optional be the emotional aspect of that? And how do we balance that?
okay, so it's a different way of looking at it. You have some things that are essential to you, and you want to understand them rationally and emotionally.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
And then you have things that are optional to you. You want to understand them rationally and emotionally.
All right.
So you want, rationally and emotionally is the way you understand things, and essential versus optional is the areas where you want to get that understanding.
Okay.
Does that better answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you for asking such a good question.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah. Yes, it does. It does. It does. And I guess the whole thing is just truly helping people, not only women, but men too, just to find a balance in life. And that's finding their clarity and knowing what their balance is, using your tools and what you have. I think even amazing that when you talk about your clients, when you talk about your different, and I remember Stacy from the last time. I remember Stacy from the last time with the husband and, in the dirtiness and stuff like that. But the one that you shared today with the young lady that been married for 20 something years. And I'm going to tell you, as you were speaking emotionally, I was connecting with her story because I heard you say that her son was the one who was giving her the option, saying, you need to make a decision on why. And I'm like, wait, what? The son is, you understand what I'm saying? So I guess it's like, at what point for the woman, and I'm trying not to be judgy at all, but I guess this is where you go into where you're searching for your self-love, where you will opt to have your son lie for you for 3 years and not have the courage to say, okay, let me sit my butt down and figure out what is going on with me, because I'm bringing too many different pieces into this puzzle that is unwarranted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say something, Naomi. It's not that she didn't want to get an answer. She desperately wanted to get an answer. She had been looking for an answer for 3 years. It wasn't like, oh, I realize I am having so many people involved in a situation that doesn't work, including my son or the other. She realized that it was not, there was a terrible situation on many fronts, but she didn't have the tools to come to a clear answer, because she could have flipped a coin at the end of the day and say, I'm going to just go with the coin, but she would have never been satisfied with that. And she would have suffered, because since her decision would make other people suffer no matter what, if she didn't understand why she made the decision in a way that she would feel at peace, she would always have regret. So she simply didn't have the tools. And quite often when we don't know what to do and there's a lot of pain involved, it's a human thing. It's, again, the primal brain is the fight or flight response, but there's also the freeze response.
Yeah.
And we go into avoidance mode because we think, you know what, I'll think about it tomorrow. I'll think about it. It's not that we don't mean it. It's just that we're so afraid. And if we don't have the tools, we keep spinning our wheels indefinitely.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I had to give you that because we are very emotional creatures. And so definitely when you were saying, I said, I know there were going to be listeners going to be like, she was just being selfish. She was just being stingy. She was just being that. And I wanted you to kind of break it down like that so they can see it in that term and that, for that. So again, Mike, thank you. It's always good with you. It is. Yeah. Really, seriously. Yeah, it is. Again, Mike, thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom with us today. If there are any last words that you have for our listeners, where can they find you at again? If this is their first time listening, to you here today, please share that with our audience.
So I always say, if you want to get absolute clarity, go to getabsoluteClarity.com. That's the 3 words, getabsoluteClarity.com. There you will find more about what I do. You'll find my book, because I've written a book it's called The Divorce Decision Decoded. I'm on a life mission to share this process with the world. It will open your eyes. And also, some people are able to do something with the book, but a lot of people may not be able to finish the book or have the wherewithal to put it in application. So this is where you can have some additional resources, or even decide to look more into how you can work with me. But whatever you do not stay in the status quo. Do not stay stuck. Look for an answer. I think I have a great tool, but even if you look for other tools, please, you need to do something, because if you are under the illusion like, oh yeah, I'll find a way to make a decision by myself. If you could have, you would have already done it. So it means you need some additional tool. You need some expert help. You need something. So go and get it. And one way you can do that is getabsoluteClarity.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you again, Mike. Thank you again for just sharing your wisdom with us today. And I know my listeners are walking away with some incredible tools for finding balance and making empowered decisions. To all of you that are listening, I encourage you to start implementing the personal balance framework that Mike mentioned. To also take some time to identify your core values and see how they can help guide your decision. And remember, it's okay to take a step back and pause when life feels so overwhelming, and balance your journey. Balance is a journey, and it is not a destination. It is not. Again, if you want to learn more about Mike's work, be sure to check out his book, Divorce Decision Decoded, and visit his website, getabsoluteClarity.com. It's full of resources to help you to make clear, confident decisions in every area of your life. And also, again, my beautiful people here at the Season of Self-Love, I hope that you found that today's discussion has been so helpful for you that you are feeling more confident in your ability to balance both your emotions and your rational thoughts when making important decisions. So the next time we will be diving more and deeper into the active balances in this series this month. So be sure to join us, and remember, practice self-love. Take it one step at a time and keep balancing all beautiful parts of your life. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, review us on this podcast, share it. Take care. Have a good one.
Bye, Naomi.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering and empowerment here at the Season of Self-Love podcast. Remember, embracing self-love is a continuous journey, and we're so glad to have you with us. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. And don't forget to join our community on Facebook at Season of Self-Love. Connect with like-minded individuals who are also on their self-love journey. Now, if you have any questions or topics that you'd like for us to explore, we love to hear from you. Email us at seasonofselflove@gmail.com and let your voice be heard. So until next time, take a moment for yourself today and remember, you are worthy of love, joy, and all the beautiful things that life has to offer. Have a good day.